The San Francisco 49ers just won the NFC Championship game. They completed a 17-point comeback victory to beat the Lions and advance to the Super Bowl, much to the dismay of most of America. Brock Purdy, a second-year quarterback, is leading his team to the Super Bowl, a year after leading him to the NFC Championship game. That is 2 more NFC Championship game appearances than the Dallas Cowboys have had this century. But what credit does Brock Purdy get for these victories? Hardly any. In fact, he's getting criticized. He has pundits and former quarterbacks saying, "Oh, well, he's not a difference maker," and "Oh, well, we'll wait and see how he looks in the Super Bowl," and "Oh, if he didn't have those weapons around him, he wouldn't be as good." And probably the worst thing you can say about a quarterback, that he is a game manager. Has there ever been a quarterback that's been judged as harshly as Brock Purdy has, considering he is 2 years into his NFL career and he's taken his team to the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl? Brock Purdy was a 7th round pick. He isn't supposed to be here. He isn't supposed to be this good. Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but all he gets is hate. Hello. Just wanted to take a second and thank you for taking time out of your day to watch some random dude on the internet talk about Brock Purdy. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe and comment your opinions. Thank you for being here. Now back to the show. Part of the reason why Brock Purdy's success is so impressive was how his NFL career started. Brock Purdy was the 262nd pick in the NFL draft in 2022. He was drafted out of Iowa State and was given the title Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant is kind of a gag name for someone who is going to have an uphill battle to even make the roster. Very rarely does the Mr. Irrelevant pick even make the roster, let alone become a, for lack of better words, relevant NFL player. The 2 most notable Mr. Irrelevant since 1976, the year that Mr. Irrelevant became a thing, are kicker Ryan Suckup, who was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in 2009, and quarterback Chad Kelly. When a kicker and a victim of a vacuum cleaner assault are the best company you keep at Mr. Irrelevant, you know it's going to be a long, tough slide to make an NFL roster, let alone lead your team to a Super Bowl your second season. Even worse for Brock Purdy, the 2022 quarterback draft class was one of the worst quarterback draft classes we have seen in the past decade. Only 1 quarterback went in the first 2 rounds, and that was Kenny Pickett. And Kenny Pickett is currently battling for a roster spot against Myles Garrett's punching bag, Mason Rudolph. If a team needed a quarterback, they likely took him in the 2021 NFL draft, where 5 quarterbacks went within the first round, and 3 of those quarterbacks were taken in the top 3 picks, one of which happened to be Brock Purdy's teammate. Brock Purdy had a solid career for the Iowa State Cyclones in his 48 starts. He had 100 total touchdowns and 12,190 yards. His junior year was by far his best season, where he led the Cyclones to a school-best 9-3 record and a 9th place finish in the college football playoff rankings. At the end of the year, Brock Purdy was regarded as a decently high draft pick, but he returned for his senior year. His senior year, he struggled, which led to him falling to be the 9th quarterback taken in the 2022 NFL Draft. When Purdy was drafted to the 49ers, there were 3 quarterbacks ahead of him on the depth chart: Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Nate Sudfeld. Brock Purdy was going to have to fight for a 3rd-string quarterback spot to even make the roster. There were no thoughts of him starting, since the 49ers had moved 3 first-round picks, the 12th overall pick in 2021, which they swapped with the Miami Dolphins, a first-round pick in 2022, a first-round pick in 2023, and a 3rd-round pick to move up to 3rd overall to draft Trey Lance. Trey Lance was viewed as the future that could take the 49ers to the promised land. With all the draft assets invested in Trey Lance and a significant amount of money invested in Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy was a long shot to ever see the field. In the 2022 NFL season, the 49ers were viewed as Super Bowl hopefuls. Unfortunately, in Week 2, Trey Lance went down with a broken fibula and was out for the year. Then in Week 13, backup quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo broke his foot and was out for the rest of the year. This meant in Week 14, the 49ers had to turn their hopes and dreams of a Lombardi trophy into the hands of a 7th-round pick that nobody knew of named Brock Purdy. There have been other Super Bowl caliber rosters that have lost their quarterback, and the second string quarterback has led them on a Super Bowl run. Two good examples of this is Kurt Warner and Tom Brady. But the problem with the 49ers was Brock Purdy started in week 14. Kurt Warner started in the preseason, and Tom Brady started in week 3. To make matters even worse, Brock Purdy's first career start was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were led by one of those great quarterbacks, Tom Brady. Tom Brady had never lost to a quarterback making his first career start. But Brock Purdy was able to guide the Niners to a 35-7 victory by throwing for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. This also was the third largest point deficit and a loss Tom Brady ever experienced in his career. Purdy was able to snowball this momentum and then went on a winning streak of 7 straight games. 2 of those games were in the wild card and divisional round. He guided the 49ers to the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Unfortunately, the clock finally struck midnight as Purdy got injured on the 6th offensive play for the 49ers, destroying the UCL in his throwing arm. The 49ers ended up losing to the Philadelphia Eagles 31-7 in the NFC Championship game, falling short of a magical Super Bowl run. Flash forward to January of 2024. Brock Purdy is 21-5 as a regular season starter and is 4-1 in the playoffs, which includes that loss to Philadelphia. Despite Brock Purdy's success as a starter, there were still doubters out there, including his own team. Before the start of the 2023 NFL season, the 49ers approached 46-year-old Tom Brady and asked him if he'd be interested in being the starter for the 49ers. It wasn't just the 49ers front office that doubted Brock Purdy. It was also media pundits and NFL fans. Common complaints against Brock Purdy were, well, anyone can be successful in the Kyle Shanahan system. Oh, the defense. The defense is pretty good. They have a lot of skilled players. That's what's keeping them around. Oh, Brock Purdy doesn't throw the ball downfield. He relies on yards after the catch. And look at all the amazing talent around him. Any quarterback could be successful there. A lot of these claims are baseless, especially if you pay attention to what has gone on since Brock Purdy has become a starter. So anyone can be successful in Kyle Shanahan's amazing offensive scheme, huh? Brock Purdy isn't special because anybody can do it. Well, since Kyle Shanahan took over for the San Francisco 49ers, he has had 6 different starting quarterbacks. Let's look into their numbers, shall we? One of the first quarterbacks Kyle Shanahan used was C.J. Beathard, and Beathard was beat hard by opposing NFL defenses, finishing with a 2-10 record as a starter for the San Francisco 49ers. Next, Kyle Shanahan turned to gunslinger Nick Mullins to lead his offense. Well, Nick Mullins led the 49ers to a 5-11 record. Ask where Nick Mullins is now. He's fighting for a third-string quarterback on the Minnesota Vikings between the terrible quarterback Jaron Hall and the Pastronaut. How about Patriots and journeyman legend Brian Hoyer? Let's see how he leads the team. Oh yeah, he led the 49ers to a 0-6 record. Oh wow, all these quarterbacks are not working. Well, let's trade up. Let's give up 3 first-round picks to go get our guy, Trey Lance. Trey Lance went 500 with a 2-2 record with the San Francisco 49ers. There's only been one quarterback in Shanahan's amazing offensive scheme that has went above 500 before Brock Purdy, and that was Jimmy Garoppolo, who had a career record of 38-17 with the San Francisco 49ers. He even led the 49ers to a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game appearance. And I know what Brock Purdy haters are thinking. They're looking at Jimmy Garoppolo and saying, see, I told you anybody could do it. Well, if we look at Jimmy Garoppolo's playoff numbers, they seem to tell a different story, and the team was successful in spite of Jimmy Garoppolo, not because of Jimmy Garoppolo. In the 2019 season, the 49ers were able to secure the number 1 seed throughout the playoffs. This meant that every game was going to be played in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, and they only had to play 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. In the divisional round matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, the 49ers were able to win 27-10 with Jimmy Garoppolo going 11 of 19 for 131 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The next game against the Green Bay Packers, Kyle Shanahan had seen enough of Jimmy Garoppolo throwing the ball, and the 49ers only threw the ball 8 times. Jimmy Garoppolo went 6 of 8 for 77 yards as the 49ers steamrolled the Green Bay Packers 37-20 behind 250 yards on the ground. In Super Bowl 54, Jimmy Garoppolo finally had to throw the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs. Jimmy finished the game 20 of 31 for 219 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He also missed the dagger throw to Emmanuel Sanders that would have iced the game for San Francisco. Instead, the Chiefs proceeded to score 3 touchdowns in the last 7 minutes, and the 49ers lost 31-20. Fear not, though. 2 seasons later, Jimmy Garoppolo's handsome face returned to the playoffs, this time as the 6th seed and had to take the show on the road. The 49ers first played the Dallas Cowboys, where Jimmy went 16 of 25 for 172 yards and an interception, and the 49ers won the game 23-17, sending America's frauds to Cancun for another year without an NFC Championship game appearance. The next week, the 49ers went to the frozen tundra in Lambeau Field, where Jimmy Garoppolo went 11 of 19 for 131 yards and 1 interception, as the 49ers beat the Green Bay Packers 13-10. It is worth noting that the only 49ers touchdown came off a blocked punt that was recovered in the end zone. Jimmy Garoppolo was able to produce 6 points on 2 field goal drives. The last playoff game for Jimmy Garoppolo as a 49er was arguably his best game. The 49ers were in the NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams on the road. But with all the red in the stadium, you sure would have thought it was a home game. Jimmy Garoppolo wanted to send all the 49ers fans home happy as he went 16 of 30 for 232 yards, 2 TDs, and 1 interception. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and the 49ers fell 17-20 to the eventual Super Bowl champions. So if I did the math right, we're looking at Jimmy Garoppolo's playoff stats here, and what do we have? Yes, 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and that whole time he went 4-2. 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Well, that must have been why the 49ers traded 3 first-round picks to go get a quarterback that was actually good. Brock Purdy has been so much better in the playoffs than Jimmy Garoppolo. Brock Purdy has a 4-1 record. He has 5 touchdowns to 1 interception and has 1,088 yards. Also in the games, especially against the Lions, Brock Purdy had to go out and win it, not hand the ball off and not lose it, unlike Jimmy Garoppolo. But you know what? Sure, any quarterback can be successful in Kyle Shanahan's offense. That's why they haven't won a Super Bowl. That's why all the quarterbacks have losing records besides one, who turned it to a pumpkin turn playoff time. Yeah, any quarterback can have success in Kyle Shanahan's offense. How about we now turn our attention to the vaunted 49ers defense? Think of all the good players they have. Oh, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bosa. Ooh, they just added Chase Young. And Tre'Davious Ward, he's a really good cornerback there. Well, what has the 49ers defense done during the time Brock Purdy has been there? Only allowed an average of 23.6 points per game with Brock Purdy as a starter in the playoffs. And if we just were to look at 2024 alone, the 49ers defense has allowed 26 points per game. You may be thinking, oh, that's 3 touchdowns and a field goal. That's not terrible. Well, shall we look at other great quarterbacks' defenses? The Kansas City Chiefs, during the whole time Patrick Mahomes has been there, has allowed 23.3 points per game scored on them. The Chiefs are known for not having a good defense during the beginning of the Patrick Mahomes era, and they have averaged less points scored on them than the vaunted 49ers defense the time Brock Purdy has been there. Oh, how about we look at everybody's golden boy, Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's defense has allowed 18.85 points at the time Joe Burrow has been there, which is almost a touchdown less than Brock Purdy's defense. How about the one-time MVP, going to be 2-time MVP, Lamar Jackson? Oh man, his defense always lets him down. No, 18.8 points allowed against his defense in the playoffs. And yet, what is Lamar Jackson's playoff record? 2-5. Brock Purdy's defenses do not play as good in the playoffs as they should with all the star power that they have, and Brock Purdy has had to overcome that during his time as a 49er. Brock Purdy's accused of what is being called a check-down merchant. That means he throws the ball short, and his receivers, they go get yards after the catch. Well, this is statistically not true. In 2023, Brock Purdy threw the ball down the field farther than any quarterback ever in the history of the NFL. Per pass attempt, Brock Purdy threw the ball 9.6 yards. The next closest ever in the history of the NFL was 2016 Matt Ryan, who threw the ball 9.3 yards down the field. Matt Ryan won the MVP that year, by the way. The closest to Brock Purdy in the 2023 NFL season was Tua Tagovailoa, who threw the ball 8.2 yards per every pass attempt. Brock Purdy threw the ball 1.5 yards farther than the next closest person in 2023. Brock Purdy does not just check the ball down, he actually throws it downfield. To further disprove this ridiculous check down merchant argument, Brock Purdy, per completion, threw the ball 7.2 yards. That means every single time a receiver caught the ball, on average, it was 7.2 yards down the field. The only quarterback that was higher in 2023 was C.J. Stroud, and he had 7.6 yards per completion down the field. And all of this with a 69.4 completion percentage. There were only 3 quarterbacks who had a higher completion percentage this year, and that was Jake Browning, Kirk Cousins, and Dak Prescott. 2 of those quarterbacks didn't even play all year, so you could argue that the statistics would have even bottomed out a little bit more, and Brock Purdy could be the second best completion percentage in the NFL. If we look at the yards after catch, Brock Purdy does benefit slightly from yards after the catch, with the 4th most in the NFL. Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and Patrick Mahomes have higher yards after the catch totals in the 2023 season. Patrick Mahomes this year was credited with not having very good wide receivers. Yet, his wideouts had more yards after the catch than the vaunted 49ers receiving core. So, does Brock Purdy throw the ball down the field? Yes, he does. And his receivers, they aren't even as good after the catch as everybody claims that they are. Brock Purdy is also criticized for making bad throws. Just look at the NFC Championship game against the Lions. Brock Purdy threw a deep pass to Brandon Ayuk, and the defender got his hands on it, knocked it up, and then Brandon Ayuk caught it. Brock Purdy the next day on ESPN First Take was crucified for throwing this pass and how it was a bad pass. I seem to remember a quarterback who played in Super Bowl 51 who threw a ball that should have been intercepted as it bounced off the defender's hands and landed in Julian Edelman's hands. This quarterback is considered the GOAT. If the GOAT can throw a bad pass in a big game, so can Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy threw a ball that Juwan Jennings had to one-handed catch. Has it ever happened where a wide receiver has made a good catch on a pass that shouldn't have been thrown? Oh, let me think. Oh, that never happens, does it? 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 Oh, no, wait, it happens all the time. There's countless examples of this. Why is Brock Purdy being crucified for giving his guy a chance? Was it the best throw? No, but he trusted his receiver to go make a play, and he did. How come all these other quarterbacks get a pass for giving their wide receivers a chance? I watched it all year with Russell Wilson, but we still praise Russ. How come Brock Purdy doesn't get that same treatment? One of the biggest critiques against Brock Purdy is the talent around him. I will absolutely concede that Brock Purdy has amazing talent around him. Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the NFL. Trent Williams is most likely the best left tackle in the NFL. Kyle Juszczyk, best fullback, and calling him a fullback is almost a discredit to how good he is at everything he does. George Kittle is a top 3 tight end, and I would argue he's not 3. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are top 30 receivers, and an argument could be made for top 20 wide receivers. The 49ers have amazing skill position players, but there are other teams out there that have amazing skill position players, and their quarterbacks get praised. Joe Burrow is a great example of this. I would argue that Joe Burrow has better talent around him than Brock Purdy. Jamar Chase is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, and when Joe Burrow is healthy, Jamar Chase is a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. T. Higgins is a top 5 free agent target for any team this year at any position. Some team is going to pay T. Higgins a ton of money to come be the wide receiver 1 when he's currently the wide receiver 2 on the Bengals. Tyler Boyd is the best wide receiver 3 in the NFL. There's only been one player that has had more touchdowns of 50-plus yards since 2021 than Tyler Boyd, and that is Jamar Chase. Tyler Boyd would be a wide receiver 2 on a lot of teams currently right now, and he's the wide receiver 3 in Cincinnati. Let's also not forget about Joe Mixon. This year, top 3 in rushing yards and top 4 in rushing touchdowns. Joe Burrow has amazing talent around him, and this was evident when Jake Browning came in and took over and led the Bengals to a 4-3 record. But what does Joe Burrow get when he does all this stuff? He gets cool nicknames. He gets nicknames like Joe Shiesty, Joe Burr, and Joe Cool. What does Brock Purdy get called? Brock Turdy. Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy have comparable talent, but Brock Purdy gets crucified for having it. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow gets praised. If you look at their records in the playoffs, what has Joe Burrow done? He's taken his team to the Super Bowl and the AFC Championship game. What has Brock Purdy done? NFC Championship game, Super Bowl. Justin Herbert is considered to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's made it to one playoff game where he had a 27-0 lead and he blew it. Let's look at the talent around Justin Herbert. Austin Eckler, an amazing running back. Keenan Allen produces yards and touchdowns year after year after year. One of the most consistent wide receivers in the game. Mike Evans is one of the best deep threats in the NFL. Why do we make excuses for Justin Herbert when he has been to one playoff game and he lost after having a 27-0 lead? But Brock Purdy gets crucified for making it to the Super Bowl and getting to the NFC Championship game. The most interesting comparison, though, is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is widely accepted as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I would argue that Jalen Hurts has better talent around him than Brock Purdy does. A.J. Brown is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Devontae Smith is the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And Dallas Goedert is a top 10 tight end. But the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is hands down the best offensive line in football. The running backs that play for the Eagles do not get enough credit because their stats go down because Jalen Hurts scores 15 rushing touchdowns a year by body surfing on Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, and Jason Kelsey. Another thing working against Jalen Hurts. Last year, the only year we have seen him in MVP form, by the way, Shane Steichen was his offensive coordinator. Shane Steichen is now with the Colts. He took Gardner Minshew and the Colts that lost Anthony Richardson almost to the playoffs and were a dropped pass away from beating the Texans, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, and going to the playoffs. Look at Jalen Hurts this year. What happened to him? The team self-destructed. He blamed the offensive coordinators, and the Eagles got bounced in the first round. Jalen Hurts has had one good season where he lost in the Super Bowl to Patrick Mahomes. Other than that, Jalen Hurts' playoff record, his whole career, is 2-3. What if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl this year? He's better than Jalen Hurts. I'm by no means saying that Brock Purdy is better than Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert. I just want to draw a comparison. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are praised, but they have amazing talent around them. So does Brock Purdy, but he gets criticized. It doesn't make any sense. Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. This became clear in his performances and come-from-behind victories in the playoff games against the Packers and the Lions. But if you watch ESPN after the NFC Championship game, you would think that the 49ers lost the NFC Championship game based on how much they talked about Purdy's first half performances. Let's look at other quarterbacks that have had poor performances to start the game in big games. Tom Brady, viewed as the greatest quarterback of all time, in Super Bowl 49 threw 2 interceptions. Nobody remembers that. They only remember him scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win the game. The media praised him for this after. That same media is bashing Brock Purdy for his come-from-behind victory. Oh, how about we look at Patrick Mahomes in his first Super Bowl in Super Bowl 54? He threw 2 interceptions at the start of that game too. But what happened? We only remember him coming back and scoring 3 touchdowns with 8 minutes and 54 seconds left in the game. The same media praised him as taken away from Brock Purdy. Here's another one for you. Joe Montana in the catch game. He threw 3 interceptions in that game. Does anybody remember that? No. All they remember is Dwight Clark catching that pass in the back of the end zone. How come no other quarterbacks are judged like Brock Purdy is? You would think that Brock Purdy making a comeback in the end of the game would be viewed as spectacular. But the media and fans right now hate on him and criticize him for things that he did early in the game after his heroics winning the game. How quickly we as fans forget slow starts. Look at Brock Purdy. Look at him in the second half of the NFC Championship game. Does a bad quarterback make throws like this? Does he scramble around like this? Brock Purdy was under siege that game. Every single throw he made in the second half, there was a Lions defender putting him on the ground in his face, and he stuck in there and took it. In a week where Lamar Jackson was playing the AFC Championship game and Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game, it is baffling to me that Brock Purdy was more elusive than the 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson, who is known for being one of the most dynamic players at the quarterback position ever. Brock Purdy is a classic underdog story. I do not understand why the media is not giving him his flowers. I don't understand why fans are not giving him his flowers. Brock Purdy should not be leading his team in his second year to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy should not have led his team to the NFC Championship game last year when he started in Week 14. Brock Purdy should not be an MVP candidate his second year. Brock Purdy was drafted 262nd, the last pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, where there were 9 quarterbacks taken ahead of him in one of the worst draft classes we've seen in the past 10 years. Yet here he is, Brock Purdy, leading his team to the Super Bowl. It is undeniable that Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League. He is not just successful because of Kyle Shanahan's system. He is not just successful because of the amazing playmakers around him. Look at how his team looks at him. They love him. They want to fight for him. He was the only person that believed in himself. And now look where he is. He is taking the 49ers to the Super Bowl his second year after starting Week 14 his rookie year. That is absolutely insane. Nick Bosa said it best.
I don't pay attention to the media much, but whoever's talking shit about Brock Purdy, what do you have now?